And if you're Bob Nutting and you're the owner of the Pittsburgh Pirates, you're going to say, "Whoa, hold on. I'm not going to take this risk when we know Paul Skenes might blow out." He won't say that publicly, but that's what he's thinking. Welcome, everyone, to the Monday edition of Fair Territory. And I almost said, welcome, everyone, to the winter meetings, because in the last week, it has almost seemed like that, even though it's April. We've had one extension after another, topped off by the big one last night, Sunday night, I should say. That one, 14 years, $500 million for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. You see the news right there. No deferrals in this deal. A straight up 14 years, $500 million. It was a deal that, from the Blue Jays' perspective, as I wrote this morning, had to get done. It was a deal to lock up their franchise player, a homegrown Blue Jay, a native Canadian, at a time in their history when they have lost one free agent after another, one big free agent after another. They've signed a few, but no Ohtani, no Soto, no Corbin Burnes, right down the line. The Blue Jays had Vladimir Guerrero Jr. all these years, failed to extend him. That was their mistake, because in the end, when this came down to crunch time, entering his walk year, they had no choice, in my opinion, but to make a deal with Guerrero Jr. They did it. It's a $35.71 million average annual value. That's the 11th highest in baseball history. The total guarantee, and I want to show you right now, the total guarantee of $500 million without deferrals, that is the second highest in present value in Major League history, behind only Juan Soto's $765 million deal. You see the top five right there. Soto at $765, Vlad at $500. Shohei Ohtani comes in at $460.8. That's reduced for deferrals. Of course, his deal was 10 years, $700 million, but it was so massively deferred. The present value is $460, $461. Mike Trout next at $426.5. Aaron Judge then at $360 million. I want to give you some more context to this deal as well, just as where it fits in terms of other first basemen, both past and present. Now, when you look at the first baseman all time, Miguel Cabrera's 8-year, $248 million deal is still something of a standard, because when adjusted for inflation, the average annual value is even higher than Vlad's. But these are the biggest guarantees for first baseman. Vlad again, $500. Miguel Cabrera, 8 years, $248. Albert Pujols, 10 years, $240. Joey Votto, 10 years, $225. Prince Fielder, 9 years, $214. What do those four guys, besides Guerrero, have in common? They all got their contracts in the 2010s. And that was an era in which teams valued first basemen more than they do today. Now, look at the active first baseman and where Guerrero ranks next to the Freddie Freemans and the Matt Olsons of the world. This chart is even more telling. There's Guerrero at $500. Matt Olson, $168. Freddie Freeman, $162. That deal, too, is worth less than that. It's deferred. And Paul Goldschmidt, 5 years, $130. That's his previous deal with the St. Louis Cardinals. So for a first baseman, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., without having to go into free agency and have the open market determine his actual value, he got a monster deal. There's no other way to look at it. Now, you could say, well, it's still $265 million below Soto. Yes, it is. But Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is not the consistent force that Soto has been throughout his career. He's not as accomplished offensively as Soto has been throughout his career. So that's why there is a difference there. And to some degree, it seems to me that Soto's deal was an outlier. And you might say, well, Ken, that's fairly obvious it was an outlier. But it was an outlier because Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets, was not going to lose this player. Cohen was going to give Soto whatever it took to get that deal done. So Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is a Blue Jay. They can now build around him. That's a story for another day, because that is not going to be easy for a team with a relatively poor farm system, an aging rotation, and questions all over the place. But at least now, your franchise pillar is in place. The Blue Jays had to get this done. We'll be back after a quick word from our friends at Foul Territory.
AJ, it is time for people to get some new clubs, and to do that, they need to go to their local PXG for a fitting, right?
No doubt. I was there today. I've been there before. Last time I was there, they gave me this killer gap wedge. Look at that sweet spot, Scott. It is worn out. That is right in the sweet spot right there. So I went and got new clubs today, new irons. But more importantly, I got this bad boy. I got me a new putter. This is my old putter. It's on order. Yes, that's my putter cover. PXG Mustang putter. Now I'm going to the Allen putter. They talked me into it because I was draining some putts today. Bob, the guy who helped me out, he helped me with my irons. He got them teed up perfectly. But then we went to the putting green. I was draining them putts because that's the most important part of golf.
PXG fittings are fun. Schedule your fitting today. As you can hear from AJ, for a limited time, you could save up to 20% on your entire order. Head over to pxg.com/foul. That's pxg.com/foul to save up to 20% on your entire order. pxg.com/FOUL. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Over the weekend, back on the field, believe it or not, we actually had baseball. Baseball all weekend. We had a big series in Philadelphia, one I attended, the Phillies and the Dodgers. And people were talking before the series, well, what does this mean in terms of October, in terms of could this be a playoff preview? And my thought was, whoa, hold on. We're only in April. And actually, the way the series played out, you can look at it now and say, yeah, there's no way to know how this is going to look in October or whether these teams will even be in the same position. The Dodgers played this series losing 2 of 3 without Freddie Freeman. Blake Snell in this series goes on the injured list. He has a shoulder issue. Shocker of shockers, a Dodger pitcher getting hurt. So who knows what the Dodger rotation will look like come October. If you recall last year, Jack Flaherty was not part of the Dodger rotation in April. Yoshinobu Yamamoto was, but he got hurt, didn't come back until September, and you had just a different kind of look ultimately once the playoffs started. Walker Buehler came back. He wasn't in the rotation at the start of the season coming off an injury. So here are the Dodgers. Yes, they have a question about Snell now. They have a question about whether Roki Sasaki can pitch a full season in his first year in Major League Baseball. And they also have 3 pitchers who are not even pitching yet, who could be significant parts of their rotation at various points of the season, and maybe even in October. I'm talking, of course, about Shohei Ohtani. I'm talking about Clayton Kershaw. And I'm talking about Tony Gonsolin. Now, Ohtani threw a bullpen on Saturday. They are slow playing this like no other. And the reason they're slow playing it is because they want Ohtani healthy for the postseason. Ohtani understands what's going on. He wants to be healthy for the postseason. And there are some people, as I mentioned on the broadcast, who believe that once Ohtani returns, he could be the best pitcher, the best starting pitcher the Dodgers have. They're number 1. Yes, even over Snell. Yes, even over Yamamoto. So good for the Phillies to win 2 of 3 in this series. And if they had been maybe a little bit more patient against Roki Sasaki on Saturday, they could have won 3 of 3. But it was really the first time Sasaki showed that great split, put it in the strike zone, or at least close enough to the strike zone, where he got some chase. So a good series. Teo Hernandez, big, obviously, offensive performance for the Dodgers on Sunday. Wasn't quite enough to make that a series victory for Los Angeles. Now, elsewhere in the NL West, we saw the Padres get off to an amazing start. It's still a really good start. And now we're seeing the Giants, the 8-1 San Francisco Giants, kind of surprising baseball with how they've come out of the gates here in the early part of the season. Now, if you remember, the Giants were Cactus League champions. And ordinarily, no one should put any stock in anything that happens in spring training. But in spring training with the Giants, you started hearing about this better vibe, about the transition from Farhan Zaidi to Buster Posey, and how there just seemed to be a better culture around the Giants. And now we're kind of seeing it come to fruition in the regular season. Now, this is going to be an easy narrative for people like myself to latch onto. Well, Buster's a baseball guy, Farhan Zaidi was an analytical guy, and now the Giants are just happier and feel better about the way things are being done in the organization under Buster. That's part of it, but we're also seeing some different things too. Willy Adames, their biggest free agent signing, clearly having an effect. Robbie Ray, having added Tarek Skubal's changeup, he is looking like he's going to be kind of like his Cy Young self. There's also Justin Verlander, who has had one okay start and one not so good start. But other than that, the team is essentially the same. We're seeing a better offensive club so far. Wilmer Flores, hot start. Mike Yastrzemski, Jung-Hoo Lee, Matt Chapman, all of these guys are hitting. Their bullpen with Doval and Walker as the anchors, that also has been a bright spot for them so far. They're playing well. There's no question about it. Will they sustain it? Will they be this much improved team that they look like right now? I'm not so sure, but certainly good things are happening with the Giants. That left side of the infield with Adames and Chapman is one of the better left sides of the infield or infields in the game, and their pitching overall has been really good so far. So good for the Giants getting off to this start, but again, we're talking about, I don't know, almost 1/20th of the season. A long way to go, folks. Time now for the Inside Dish, the part of the show where I talk about maybe a story I've written, maybe a trend in the game, maybe some big news item, maybe something else entirely. And this week I want to go back to something I mentioned on Foul Territory last week. It was after I wrote this story about Juan Soto and how he spent 3 weeks with a minor league host family and still keeps in touch with them. Now, this story was unusual for a couple of reasons, and it was a lot of fun to do, and that's kind of why I want to revisit it. It was unusual, one, in the way I got put onto it. Now, you guys know from Twitter especially, but in general, that baseball writers in every sport, are competitive with each other. They want to be first with stories, first with news. They want to be better than the next person. That's just like any other business, right? But in this case, it was another writer that actually put me onto this story. Now, I'm not going to name this writer because, I don't know, some editor somewhere might get mad at him. But the fact of the matter was, this writer had nothing he could have done with this. He is a beat writer for a team somewhere. So he said, listen, Kenny, I've heard about this guy. He was the head of Juan Soto's host family. I've got his number. Would you want to maybe look into this? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I'm always looking for stories, always looking for new ideas, especially different ideas about superstar players. So the writer passed me the number. I contacted Brian Campbell, and we started talking about his time with Juan Soto. Now, it only happened after I texted Campbell initially, and he said, let me get back to you. I want to check with Juan. He got back to me within a half hour, and Juan obviously gave him his blessing. And I was very surprised by that, for starters, that he had this kind of relationship with Soto where Soto would get back to him like that. And this was during the middle of spring training. So it wasn't like Soto was overloaded, but at the same time, he's getting ready for the season. He's got media commitments, all kinds of things going on. And yet Soto responded to him that quickly. And that's what led me to believe, okay, there's something here. These guys are still tight. And then Campbell told me his story and how he hosted Soto with his 3 sons and his ex-wife at the time. He had a daughter who was also obviously part of the family, but not there. She was older and out of the house. And how he just had a really wonderful time hosting Soto and just enjoying him and different players. There were, I believe, 4 players in the house at that time when Juan was there. Now, Soto was there for only 3 weeks. That was 2018. In 2018, he starts off at low A. Then he goes to high A, double A, and the majors. He's in low A for 3 weeks. Then he makes those 3 jumps that I just said. High A, double A, majors within a month. He was in the majors by May 20th at age 19. And yet, even in those 3 weeks, Soto formed a bond with his family, and a bond that continues to this day. They will go see him play from time to time. They don't ask for tickets, but he'll give them batting practice passes. At times, Brian Campbell, the father, will go out to dinner with Soto when he's in Baltimore or Washington. And when I finally spoke to Soto about this in Houston, right at the start of the season, when the Mets were in Houston, Soto lit up talking about this guy and this family. And he just said, basically, it was the time of his life. They had a basement. The guys would go downstairs. Players would come, not just the ones in the house, but they would sing karaoke. They would play cards. They would play video games, all kinds of things. And it was kind of just a very memorable time at a time in his life when he was quite impressionable and still relatively new to the United States. Knew English even then. Juan Soto has known English really the whole time he's been a professional. So he communicated well. And again, it was just a happy story to do. And the other interesting part of it is that host families no longer exist in minor league baseball. And the reason for that is actually a good reason. That there is a minor league collective bargaining agreement that guaranteed minor league players more money and guaranteed them housing. So host families are not really necessary. And yet, even as something has been gained, and something clearly was gained in this minor league agreement. These guys are getting paid better. The host family experience is something that a lot of players who went through it still speak of fondly. On the show Friday, Todd Frazier and Eric Kratz both spoke fondly of host families that they had. They're still in touch with them. And you can go to countless major leaguers, ones who were all part of this, and they will tell you the same thing. In the case of players from Latin America, like Soto, they could be especially meaningful because, of course, they're transitioning to a new culture. But even in the case of players who were born here, like Frazier and Kratz, host families can leave an indelible impression. And that's what happened. That's what the story was about. I thank this writer. He knows who he is. I've thanked him personally for putting me onto this story, and I hope people enjoyed reading it. It was a lot of fun to do. We'll be back after a quick word from our friends at Foul Territory.
Kratz, do you like spending an hour on grocery shopping?
Nope. Speed up the process, please.
Introducing Hungry Root to the FT fam.
Now we can all be bougie with our own personal shopper to handle the food shopping, including recs based on what you're looking to put in your body.
I stack my Hungry Root box with items like gluten-free, dairy-free blueberry waffles for breakfast, shrimp veggie bowls for lunch, and a little filet mignon with potatoes and broccolini for dinner.
You can also say just, hey, Hungry Root, I eat paleo, or I'm vegetarian, and they load up your cart with personalized recommendations.
And those recs keep evolving as they learn about what you're into. Also, no BS, as in no artificial sweeteners or preservatives in any of Hungry Root's food. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as FT does. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/FT and use code FT. That's hungryroot.com/FT, code FT to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life.
Time now for Grillin Ken. Let's get to your questions. The first question comes from Adam, not a Cincy insider, who asks, what is going on with the Reds? Adam, it's a good question as you watch your team struggle to score runs almost on a daily basis. What's interesting about the Reds is they scored 14 in one game, 11 in another, and in their other 8 games combined, they've only scored 14 runs. So what is going on? Part of it is health. They don't have Tyler Stevenson. They don't have Austin Hayes. Spencer Steer has a shoulder issue. He's been compromised. That's 3 players that they were counting on and are counting on to be significant contributors. Of the guys that are healthy, really Matt McLain is the only one performing, I would say, to expectations or even above. His OPS is over 800. No other Red, including Ellie De La Cruz, is over 800. And this was a team that earlier in the offseason, going into spring training, I thought might surprise. I still believe they might surprise, but I had someone tell me right before the season started, someone in their organization, who said, you know what, I'm a little worried we're still 1 bat short, and that was even with all of the injured players. So I thought the bullpen would be the Reds' biggest question, and it still might be. But right now, the offense is somewhat of a concern. I want to see what they look like when they're healthier, but they've got to get going a little bit from an offensive perspective. So far, not good. Next question comes from Enzo, who asks, with Wilyer Abreu the best hitter on the planet, not really exaggerating there, Cora's love of Rafaela's defense in center, and Duran in left, and Roman Anthony ready for the big leagues, what do the Red Sox do? Fair question. Great problem to have if you're the Red Sox and you left Yoshida out of the equation. I don't see how he fits now that Devers is the DH. Now, once Anthony is ready, yes, it really becomes an interesting question. At the moment, they're using Christian Campbell in center field on certain days when they want to get David Hamilton into the lineup as a left-handed hitting second baseman. I don't know how long that will continue once Roman Anthony is ready. And again, having all of these players, all of these talented players, guys who are really going to be or are already significant contributors, this is not a problem. Generally speaking, managers and coaches and front office people like to say these things have a way of working out on their own. That's true, and sometimes someone will get hurt, and sometimes there will be underperformance or something else. But the real issue to me is going to be Yoshida, and will he be ultimately a guy that they might have to DFA? I don't know where this is going, but again, if you're the Red Sox and you've got all these players, and Rafaela still is an offensive question, let's face it, you're in a good position. The final question comes from Eyal, who asks, what would a contract extension for Skenes look like? He has many arbitration years left, but what would it take to convince him to forego free agency? AL, I like the question, but at the same time, it's almost irrelevant because Bob Nutting is not going to do what it takes as owner of the Pittsburgh Pirates to convince Paul Skenes not to go to free agency. It's just not going to happen, right? Based on everything we've seen from Nutting, there is no way this gets done. But for purposes of this exercise, let's consult my colleague Tim Britton from The Athletic, who is the expert on extension valuations. He does them basically all year long for The Athletic, and he wrote an entire story on Skenes, I believe it was in spring training, and what an extension might look like for him. Now, Skenes has one more pre-arb year left after this one more year before arbitration, a time when the club can dictate his salary, and then the 3 years of arbitration. Tim determined that those years would be worth, including this year, about $38 million. And then he said, okay, what if you think of Skenes as a guy who will be in position to command a record average annual value as a starting pitcher? He might be that good. And let's say that's $44 million. So the way Tim started out this process, he had Skenes somewhere along the lines of 7 years, 180. But that's assuming just 3 years of free agency. So ultimately, when Tim played this thing out, he kind of looked at it like Julio Rodriguez's deal with Seattle. And you know that deal, it's complicated, but it guarantees Julio a certain amount, north of $200 million. And then there's a club option after, I believe, the 5th season. And if the Mariners pick that up, there's another $200 million coming, something along those lines. It's complicated. Go to Cott's Baseball Contracts to look it up. But basically what it involves is escalators and the ability for the Mariners to make this deal even more lucrative if they want to keep the player from opting out. That's the kind of deal you would do with Paul Skenes. It's a different situation, obviously, than Julio Rodriguez because Paul Skenes is a starting pitcher. And as Stephen Nesbitt wrote last week in The Athletic, the entire sport is basically holding its breath, hoping Paul Skenes stays healthy and warrants an extension. And if you're Bob Nutting and you're the owner of the Pittsburgh Pirates, you're going to say, hold on, I'm not going to take this risk when we know Paul Skenes might blow out. He won't say that publicly, but that's what he's thinking. And it's not unfair to think that because all pitchers generally do get hurt at some point. So I don't know where this is going. I would expect Paul Skenes is going to be a free agent after 4 more years beyond this one. And when he becomes a free agent, assuming he's healthy, he's going to make a lot of money. Period and paragraph. Thanks everyone for your questions. Thanks everyone for watching, for listening. You know where to find us: YouTube, Apple, Spotify. We will be back on Thursday, myself and my co-host, Alana Rizzo, our normal Thursday program, live at 12:30 Eastern. Have a great week, everyone.
Let's shout out the BetMGM First Bet $1,500 offer when you use the bonus code FOUL. Get that offer when you download the BetMGM Sportsbook app or at BetMGM.com. Sign up, enter that bonus code FOUL, and deposit at least $10 into your new account. Place your first wager and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. If the bet does lose, your bonus bets will be available once your initial wager is settled. Gambling problem or concern? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.